outlined the scheme in detail here at Eyewitness News, and now the other shoe has dropped. Former St. Tammany Sheriff Jack Strain has been indicted on federal corruption charges.
The 16-count bribery and kickback conspiracy allegations were announced today by U.S. Attorney Peter Strasser. Investigative reporter Mike Pearlstein was there and joins us now with more on that.
Well, that's right, Karen. As Peter Strasser said, it was a classic kickback scheme, allegedly orchestrated by the longtime sheriff who skimmed public money for himself, his friends, and his family. At the heart of the indictment is St. Tammany Workforce Solutions, a prison work release program which Jack Strain allegedly set up using straw owners, then funneled profits back to himself.
Sheriff Strain had a sacred duty to uphold and honor the public trust. Instead, he took undue advantage of his official position to unjustly enrich himself, his friends, and his own family at the expense of the taxpayer.
The indictment alleges that payments were made to Strain's co-conspirators, deputies Skip Keene and David Hansen, both of whom pleaded guilty earlier this year. Money went toward everything from luxury vacations, jewelry, hunting trips, and even a down payment for a truck.
The dollar amount of the crime itself is over $1 million.
Channel 4 legal analyst Chick Foray says these charges only compound Strain's legal problems, coming on top of serious sex charges Strain is already facing in St. Tammany.
The classic kickback scheme. It's not sophisticated. Let me set my buddies up in a state program. Let me funnel the money that's supposed to go through that program, and I'll be the one that receives it on the back end.
Now, we reached out to Strain's attorney, Katie and Karen, but we have not yet heard back for comment.
All right, I'm sure this doesn't come as a huge surprise to you. You broke this story, what, like 6 years ago?
Yeah, we did. I've been reporting on this for 6 years with our partners at the New Orleans Advocate, NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune. Yeah. And we first had the chance to question Strain about it in 2013. Here's what he had to say.
I'm telling you that I have no interest, no family member of mine has an interest, no relative in any capacity has an interest, no in-laws or outlaws or anything else. This is a very straightforward business.
Yeah, that's what he had to say. That was in October of 2013 when we first aired our 6 years worth of investigative reports on the work release programs. We raised questions about the money. We raised questions about the sweetheart deal, the lack of supervision of the inmates leading to drug overdoses and even deaths. By March of 2014, after our reports, Strain shut down the Covington work release program, sending many of those inmates over to the Slidell work release program that's at the heart of most of these allegations. Then in July of 2016, Strain lost his re-election bid, remember, and incoming Sheriff Randy Smith took that work release program back under STPSO control. It took until March of last year, 2018, for the first federal grand jury subpoena to the sheriff's office to surface in the investigation, even though there was a strong indication that that probe had gone on much longer. And it's been a long time coming.
Right, and I mean, really, the sex charges were a fallout of the corruption investigation, right?
Absolutely.
Or at least yours.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely, absolutely. It all kind of spun off from there. And one of the people who's been integral in this federal investigation, even the state investigation as well, is Raphael Goyeneche at the Metro Crime Commission. He was credited today by the U.S. Attorney. He said today, quote, Corruption is greed and self-service taking precedence over public service. This indictment today shows public officials, even the most powerful public officials, will be held accountable. We, of course, have continuing coverage of the Strain situation coming up on Eyewitness News at 6, as well as all of our investigations. You can see them on WWLTV.com.